This is, as I said, part number 7 of the Prince of this world. And one of the reasons that we're talking about the Prince of this world is simply because we're in the Christmas season, and we talk about Jesus Christ, who is the Prince of life. He is the one that will come and establish a perfect kingdom on this planet for 1,000 years and beyond. But before that time, there is, as I prayed, someone who comes and takes a stand against Christ before that time and tries to bring in a kingdom apart from the true King, our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, one of the means by which he does that is a mark. And we have studied this mark before, but as we do, we always study more, we always glean more information, and the updated information we always present to you. And again, we present it also to those who are newcomers so that they might know and understand and be brought up to date with us. The mark of the beast, we believe, will look something like this. It has to do with the Alpha and the Omega title of Jesus Christ that is so prevalent in the book of Revelation. I say prevalent, it's mentioned 4 times, but it's very important because he is the beginning, the end, the first and the last. He is the first in place and leadership. That's what Alpha represents, and he's the last word on anything. That's what the Omega represents. The blue is Alpha. The black is the Greek capital letter Omega, and we fit them together there. So we believe the mark of the beast will most probably look like this. Also, in the arch of the Alpha, there will be the all-seeing eye indicating universal consciousness. It is the mark on your dollar bill placed there by a group called the Illuminati. They are in charge of the world's finances, and they will undoubtedly be financing Antichrist campaign. The triangle in the Alpha will indicate the 3 false gods of the tribulation: Lucifer, Antichrist, and Apollyon, and we looked at that this morning. And then the universal product code will turn into the universal people code, and each person will receive this barcode so that they can be scanned for purchasing, for whereabouts, for inventory, for banking needs, and that sort of thing. Then we saw that, and this is one of those pretty much unknown facts, there are really 3 prevalent gods in the tribulation period, and we get that right from Daniel chapter 11. He exalts himself above all gods. He disregards any gods except for 3. And the exception is, we saw in the second place here, because number 1 is the devil, but he himself thinks that he's a god. And Paul says he presents himself as such. He, as God, sits in the temple showing himself that he's God. So Antichrist, though he's a man, pretends that he is the God-man, Christ Jesus. But then he honors the God of forces. That's the ultimate, the most prevalent God in the tribulation period. That's the devil. And then it says that he serves a God that is a strange God that his fathers didn't know. Now, the only one in the Bible that we can figure out that is a God that will emerge during the tribulation period is the angel Apollyon. He comes up out of the bottomless pit. He is one of the morning stars. He is the destroying angel. He's got the power, indeed. He's one of the strongest ones under Lucifer. But he fell subsequent to the original angelic fall when the devil led 1/3 of the angels. He fell in Genesis 6. He was assigned or confined to Tartarus and stayed there for 6,000 years until he's released in the tribulation period. Undoubtedly, the devil will possess Antichrist and give him supernatural powers. Apollyon will possess the false prophet and give him his supernatural powers. Now, that brought us then to what Someone said this morning that they had a headache in looking at this particular chart, and I get headaches looking at it too, because you do have to think about it, and it's true. A lot of Tylenol, a lot of Motrin, a lot of Bufferin go into every chart that we have here. You just got to think about it. It's so much easier to go to a charismatic church and stand there and go, blessed Jesus, than have to think about these charts. I guarantee you. We just plug into God and He'll give it to us. Wish it was that easy, but it's not. So we have to decipher the beast. Sometimes when the term beast is used, it's referring to the man who is the leader over the beast. He is indicated as being a little horn who grows taller and stouter than the other horns in the beast. Now in Daniel chapter 7, when it's first introduced, the beast has one head with 10 horns. That, of course, is representing the empire. When it refers to the collective beast, all of the nations involved, the total agenda and resources, militarily, financially, of the beast. It's talking about the empire. The mark of the beast is actually the economic mark of the Western European Empire. That's what it'll be. It'll be 10 nations from Western Europe. So it is that is being referred to. For example, in verse number 7, it says, after this I saw in the night visions a fourth beast. This beast had, it was different from the beast before it, it had 10 horns. So that's referring to the empire. For example, in verse number 19, then I would know the truth of the fourth beast. And verse 20, of the 10 horns that were in his singular head. That's referring to the empire. But now, right here, we have the man called the beast. Note in verse number 11. And I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, and I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. Well, you say, Pastor, is that a reference to the empire? No. Remember, the empire is visioned here by Daniel as a beast, but it is a symbol of the real thing. The whole empire is not cast, as it were, into the lake of fire as this ugly, massive beast, but its leader is. Turn with me to Revelation 19. Revelation 19. Here's where the man, the beast, referred to in that verse we just read in Daniel. I looked at the beast, the empire. It had 10 horns and a little horn. I considered the little horn, and I considered until the beast, this time it's a reference to the man, was taken, and his body put in the flame. Where is that? Note verse 20, if you want to correlate it. And the beast was taken, the man, not the whole empire, though many of the empire will go in as the sheep and goats. Many of the empire, the soldiers will have their flesh burned and the like. They'll end up there eventually. But the beast was taken, the leader, the man over the beast. Beast 1, beast 2. Beast 1 is the man, beast 2 is the empire. With him, and these both were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. Okay, now there's one more thing with regard to thinking. While we're in the book of Revelation, go to chapter 13. I stood upon the sand of the sea, and behold, a beast rose up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, there are 2 points I want to make here with regard to this. When Daniel looks at the beast, he sees him as having 10 horns, but only 1 head. that implies that there is unity there. In other words, the 10 horns and the agenda of all of them are united. They bond together all of their resources under the power of this man called the beast. Turn to chapter 17 of this same book. Verse number 12. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. Verse 13. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength to the beast. Now, the beast, again, is the little horn. It comes up and it is over the other 10. Now, one point we want to make here with regard to this, and we were talking in choir practice about the ecumenical movement. It starts with Catholicism. Now, I don't know if any of you read the newspaper this morning. It has Santeria survives. Now, these people are voodoo worshipers, actually. They practice voodoo, and they're still members of the Roman Catholic Church. You figure that out. But Santeria has to do with the fact that they worship Catholic saints sometimes, and then when the Spirit so moves them, they'll slaughter a duck or a lamb or what have you, dip their blood and put a pin in a voodoo doll and put a hex on you and that sort of thing. And yet they're still members of the Roman Catholic Church. They have their idols and Catholic idols in their home and churches together, but they're Satan worshipers. And that is why, if you hold your place here in Revelation 17 and come back to Revelation chapter 9, you'll remember Vatican II. In Vatican II, the ecumenical movement was once again revived by Catholicism and is being pushed today. Now, here's where the Santeria comes in. As long as you put a little money into the Catholic Church, you can, and are baptized into the Catholic Church, you can practice whatever you want. Obviously, the harlot church is the main church, but it is the name for anything goes as long as you are part of the harlot church. Verse number 20 of Revelation 9. The rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of the hands, that they should not worship devils. Now, how can they worship devils and come to Revelation 17? Where it says, I'll show you the judgment, verse 1, of the great whore that sits upon many waters. Who is this whore? The whore is the Roman Catholic Church. If you want to listen to her voice, call 1-800-453-MARY. You can listen to her voice. That's the whore. That's who it is. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. But you say, Pastor, you mean everybody belongs to the Roman Catholic Church? Yeah, and in the end, most, except for the remnant, will begin to belong to this one church. And here's how they get away with padding their membership rolls. As long as you're baptized and contribute a little bit, you can worship devils. That's what Santeria is. You can keep your own heathen religion. Africans, Caribbeans, you can do what you want. You can practice voodoo as long as you have a statue of Mary and a couple of the saints and you contribute a little bit. And it all comes under the umbrella. That's fornication. That's spiritual adultery. And anybody part of the ecumenical movement is committing such an act. Now, the point that we want to make is we know that it is the Roman Catholic Church because this harlot, verse 3, sits upon the scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having the 7 heads and 10 horns. So, come back to Revelation chapter 13. Where it says, the beast came up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns with the names of blasphemy on its head. Now, that's the first point that we wanted to make with regard to this. We know it's the Roman Catholic Church because guess who these 10 horns are? They're 10 kings over Western Europe. And what is the predominant religion over Western Europe but Roman Catholicism? And it's called Roman Catholicism because the empire from which it emerged was the Holy what? Roman Empire. It's the same place, same geographical location. And they come together, church and state. And it's important because it's the Roman Catholic Church who ultimately introduces and supports Antichrist. Now, those poor people, Antichrist turns these 10 kings against her and destroys her in the mid part of the tribulation. But that's the first thing that we wanted to note. The second thing that we wanted to note is, it says in Daniel how it gets its 7 heads instead of 10. It keeps 10 horns, but it only now has 7 heads. Now, what is the head? Well, if the head here is a geographical location involving the boundaries of all 10 of these nations, then each head here is a nation. We have nations here in North America. For example, we've got Canada. We understand that has boundaries. America, Mexico, going on down to Panama, and we have Brazil and so forth, the countries in South America. Those all have geographical boundaries over which one man is president or prime minister or whatever you want to call him. Now, that's what the horns are. They're kings or the number one leaders of the heads. Now, how does this help us in understanding the book of Revelation? It's very simple. There are those who say, now, Antichrist is killed. His body lays in state. And then he comes alive again supernaturally. He is resurrected. And you know where they get that? Note. Verse number 3. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. And the deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, this is Revelation 13, verse 3. I'm sorry. Now, ask the question. If the head was a geographical location here, and the heads are the geographical locations here, nations, boundaries, states like we have. We have boundaries between Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, and so forth. And that's what a head is, a geographical location where there are boundaries over which one horn or a governor or a king rules. Then if a head is wounded, what is it that is split? What is it that suffers damage? A geographical location. It's not the beast himself, except for the fact that one of the heads is split. Now, I believe that, for example, that one of the heads is the nation of Germany. After World War II, what happened to Germany? It was split. It was wounded. You had an East Germany, which was communistic, and a West Germany, which was socialistic, but never the two shall meet. Why? Because you had the Malta Treaty and some of the ones met together, and they decided that Germany was not ever going to be a complete nation again. It was split down the middle. Guess what happened? I believe it was 1987. Was it 88? The wound was healed, wasn't it? The head came together. And that is what happens here. There is going to be one of these 10 that will have a split as Germany. It could be Germany again for all we know. There's a rise in communism again in Russia. And for all we know, East Germany could split off again. There could be a revolt. I'm not predicting this. I'm just saying it's possible. And then they see the error of their ways and they come back together again. And the world wonders, the power of the beast to unite. And that's what happens It is not that he gets killed. It's that one, note specifically, I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. You've got to keep it in context, and you've got to keep the symbolism consistent. If a head is a geographical location or a nation, then one of those 7 heads is wounded and is revived. Okay, now let's get back to point number 8. Oops, that's what you call overshooting the runway. In point number 8 of our outline, we were talking about the global alliance of Antichrist and the timetable when all of these things come together. Let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. Okay, and we're going to begin with something that you already know. This time period is 7 years long. Now, because they say that the world goes after the beast, the Bible says that, many have said that Antichrist rules the whole world for all 7 years. The fact of the matter is he does not. He is beginning to rule the world. But he starts off with, now we're in Daniel chapter 9. What chapters precede Daniel chapter 9? What 2 chapters preceded? 7 and 8. Give that man a star. You may have misbehaved in choir, but you're doing real good now. In chapter 7, how do we know if Daniel chapter 9 says, the prince that shall come, how do we know who this prince is? Daniel's already told us who he is. How do we know that? Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. There came up among them a little horn. And behold, in this horn were eyes, the eyes of a man, a mouth speaking great things. And verse number 21, and I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Verse number 25, and he, the king that comes up after the 10, subdues 3. He shall speak great words against the Most High and wear out the saints of God. Daniel is going to tell us who the prince that shall come is in chapter 8. Verse 23. In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance shall stand up. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. We talked about that. Satan gives him his power. And we know this is Antichrist because the last part of verse 25 says, he is the one that stands up against the prince of princes and is broken without hands. Now we come to Daniel chapter 9, and guess what? It says in verse number 26, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And then verse 27, and he, who is that? The prince that shall come. The king of fierce countenance. The little horn who was small grew bigger and stouter, who was given an eyes and a mouth, who made war with the saints till the Son of Man came and broke him without hand. It's the same guy, just different aspects of him. Now, the point that we make is, in Daniel chapter 7, how many nations did he start off with? 10. He starts off with 10 nations. So when we mark here, when Antichrist comes on the scene, he has 10. He does not have the king of the north. Now let me give an explanation here with regard to our time. Don't know how much time we're going to have. We'll probably have to have a part 8 here to get through the rest of this. But There are actually two northern kings that we must identify. One is called Gog. He is the leader of Russia and several other nations. The king of this is called the Northern Confederacy, theologically. This king is the king of the West. This is Antichrist. He rules from Rome first and rules 10 kings of the West. This is called the Western Confederacy. There are kings of the East. Now remember, we're talking now all nations being gathered together to the Battle of Armageddon, all meaning all there literally. So just about anybody that you could think of from the Pacific Rim westward is involved in the kings of the East here, with the exception of by the time you get to the lands around Palestine, from Iraq to Jordan, to Edom, down here, Egypt and so forth. This is called the Pan-Arabic bloc of nations. This is called the Pan-Oriental bloc of nations. Now, Antichrist only rules at the start 10 nations. Now, you know what's going on there right now. The Palestinians, those Arab nations that are around Israel, this little dot being Jerusalem, are trying to get the land. And the Mosque of Omar, not the Temple of Solomon or the plans that Solomon had, is built on the rock. Somebody's going to come along and say, wait a second, to the Jews, you're not big enough to stand alone against these nations. I'm going to help you. Guess who it is? Verse number 27. And he, the prince that shall come, having the 10 horns standing with him, shall confirm a covenant with many. The many there has to do with Israel. Now, guess what? Israel at this particular time has a king. We'll just put the Jewish king, and it's going to have a false prophet or a high priest. Perhaps those are the words: a Jewish king and a high priest. That would be better. We'll X that out. It's with these people that he makes a covenant with many, the leaders of Israel, for the 7-year period. So he starts off at this point with 10 nations only. Now remember that at this point he also is pictured by the first seal as the rider on the white horse. No arrow, but he's got a bow. And he goes forth conquering and to conquer. So he has this, plus now he has satellites. Now, satellites are just simply nations around Western Europe that he begins to conquer. Time is marching on. Now, we're going to see some things that happen in the first 3.5 years and things that are going to happen in the second 3.5 years. All right? He begins by signing this peace pact, and time begins marching. He takes some satellite nations. Now, come with me to chapter 11. Now, we're going to go through chapter 11, and we're going to see pretty much the time frame. Remember, we've got how many years to work with? 7. It is a closed system. There are all just 7 years. It can't be less than that. It can't be more than that. And at the end of the 7 years, God is going to gather all the nations around Jerusalem. So every single one is finally and ultimately brought to this point. But now let's travel together. We're going to be futuristic here, and we're going to travel together in time. Last part of verse number 22. Yea, also the prince, this is Daniel 11, last part of verse 22, the prince of the covenant. Now let me ask you, where did we just hear that phrase? Daniel chapter 9, verse number 27. That's the prince of the covenant. He signs a covenant with many for 1 week. So we have the beginning of when he signs that covenant right here. We know that he has, when he signs that covenant, 10 nations, and he will have plus satellite nations. He does not have the king of the north and the nations he represents. He does not have the kings of the east. They are coming to make war with him. He does not have the king of the south originally. So he begins, and note what he does. All of this has to do with him coming in and out of Israel, coming from Rome to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Rome, until he finally, 3.5 years in, comes and makes his home in Jerusalem. All right? Let's read it. You're going to have to stay with me. Also the prince of the covenant, the beginning of the tribulation, verse 23, after the league made with him. When would that happen? At the beginning, he made a league for 7 years. That pinpoints the time. It's the start right here. He shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up, literally come into the land, and become strong with a small people. Well, just a bunch of peace preservers, NATO guys with the blue hats on. We're just going to be here just to ensure that there are no infractions of any of the nations coming in, to allow you to start up your temple worship again. Verse number 24. He shall enter peaceably upon the fattest places of the province. Where does he come in? He comes in toward the valley of Megiddo, a place that is rich in agriculture, and a place that is also advantageous militarily. He'll do that which his fathers have not done. Remember, we contend he's half Jew, and his father's father, for he's going to scatter among them, among the leaders that he is going to deal with, the prey, the spoil, the riches, for he'll forecast devices against strongholds. But now, does he have an easy time of it? No. Remember, this is the first half of the tribulation period. We'll place it, say, somewhere around here. What happens to him? He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. This is the Pan-Arabic bloc that will include Egypt. It will include Jordan. It will include Saudi Arabia and all the other Arabic nations. It will undoubtedly include Iraq. And possibly, though I'm going to reserve the king of Syria here for being another king of the north, and we'll talk about that later. But this king says, hey, to the Arabs, do you know what this guy's doing? He is ensuring that the Mosque of Omar, our sacred site, where Muhammad went up into heaven, the Jews are going to build their temple there. They get mad and decide to try to invade the land. So there is a skirmish. Obviously, Antichrist does not have the king of the south or the favor of the Arabs at this point. So they have a battle. Last part of verse 27. But it shall not prosper. In other words, neither one comes out, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. These two kings are going to face one another again. All right? Verse 28, then shall he return into his land. He went into the Jewish land, decided he was going to confront the king of the south. The king of the south came at him, and neither one won at that point. So what does he do? He goes back home. He'll return to his land, but he's got great riches. And in his heart he shall be against the holy covenant. He shall do exploits and return to his own land. Now, it's getting closer to the middle point of the tribulation period. Now, what happens there? Just hold your place here. Turn back to Daniel chapter 9. I can see it now. Not only are you going to take Tylenol, you're probably going to go to the emergency room for a shot of morphine before this is all over. Get the numbing effect. All right? He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, now what does the word midst mean but middle? 3.5 years in, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now what does that tell us? When he made the covenant, he allowed Israel to take over the Dome of the Rock, to build their temple there, and to start, though it's corrupt, a corrupt form of Mosaic worship, the institution of animal sacrifices, the institution of the priesthood. It's going to be the high priest. Oh, I put HB. Wait a second. Maybe his name was Hubert Bernstein. That's why I put in there. Okay, it's Jewish. A little joke, a little inside joke. Probably very little joke, but a little humor there. HP, high priest. The high priest that he originally signs with will undoubtedly be the one that introduces him as God in the Holy of Holies. You see, he is having secret meetings with these fellows. I'll show you how we know that in just a little bit. He'll cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease for the abomination of desolations to make it desolate. Okay, let's come to chapter 11, verse 29. Let's see where we've come thus far. Initially, he makes a covenant. That's the beginning, a league made with him. 10 nations and time marches on into the tribulation period. He has wars and rumors of wars, and he conquers other satellite nations. Finally, he comes down into the land of Israel, and he has a confrontation with the king of the south. Now remember, it's probably the Egyptian king that unites the Arab nations against him. He backs off. He does some exploits. He holds them off at the border, as it were, and he goes back home. But he begins thinking in his heart, I hate the Holy Covenant for Israel. If I could only be down here, if I could only put my headquarters here, I could be able from the navel of the earth, and that's what it's called, from the center of the earth, from God's perspective, to rule the world if I could only be there. But I've got to hate the Holy Covenant, and I've got to corrupt those that are following the covenant. Let's see. At the time appointed, he shall return and come towards the south. But it's not going to be as the former or the latter. See, there's going to be another time. He's returning here, and there's another skirmish with the king of the south. For the ships of Cyprus or eastern Mediterranean shall come against him, and he's going to be grieved. He's going to return again, back to Rome. But now, he has indignation against the Holy Covenant, and this is what he does. He even returns to Jerusalem. Now, guess what he's going to do there? That we're talking about very near the center part, right here. He has intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. Now, who is it that's in power now over the land of Israel that forsakes the Holy Covenant? But the Jewish king and the high priest, the number one leaders of the government and religion of the Jews. Guess what he does? He has intelligence with them. Hey, you guys don't let you want to make a little profit on this, and we would say kiddingly, though it's not politically correct, but you Jews are in it for the buck. Hey, let's us have a little deal under the table. So he has intelligence with those in the know, those that are powers that be, that hate the Holy Covenant. Arms shall stand on his part. How many arms? 10 nations of Western Europe, plus satellites by now, satellite nations. So he's got a massive military machine, a mighty army. And guess what he does? He comes down in the middle part of that, and with his might, he brings his soldiers in, arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. What is that? The abomination of desolation. He said, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to declare myself God, the Jewish Messiah, and note, he'll take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. Now that happens here. Now, you would think that things would be rosy for him at this point. They will not be. Why? Well, let's bypass a couple of things here and go to verse number 40. Time is passing on here, and what he mainly does from this point into the middle part of the last 3.5 years is look for Jews. He tries to get them to join his system or kill them off. However, note verse number 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south pushes at him again. Can't get rid of this guy. He's coming at him again. Now the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots. Now here is what probably happens here. In the first part of the tribulation period, as they're signing this covenant, God is judging Gog on the northern hills of Israel. They have millions of soldiers, but only 1/6 of them go back. They probably join forces with the Syrian king, who is the second king of the north listed in prophecy. Gog is the first, foremost, most powerful, but at the end, the king of the north, the Syrian king, undoubtedly is the one, because he is the one in context here, who unites probably Iran and Turkey and some of these others. There'll be Libya and others, Ethiopia, that are involved here. So the king of the north decides to come at him. So now he's got some problems. Note verse number 44. Well, let's go back to verse number 41. He, this is Antichrist, shall enter also the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. Edom, Moab, and Ammon, these escape. But Egypt is not going to escape. He comes down and he finally gets Egypt, but some do. Libyans, verse number 43, and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. There are others coming after him. They realize what's going on. Now, when this happens, remember he is dedicating a majority of his force down against these men. And what happens? Tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. What if you have committed the major part of your force down toward the south, and all of a sudden you get a communique that millions of Chinese soldiers are headed your way, and millions of Arabic plus the 1/6 of the Russians are coming back down at you? What would you do? This is what he does. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. Now, let's go back. We just got a few minutes to the book of Revelation. Chapter 16. The king of the south comes at him. The king of the north comes at him. He hears tidings out of the north. They're getting reinforcements. Troubles him. The king of the east are coming. Now, all of this. Let's go to Revelation chapter 19. I wanted chapter 16, and then we'll go to 19. All of this is done because it's part of God's plan and program. At the end, Antichrist does succeed in uniting all of these armies. He does so because Jesus Christ is coming. How does he succeed in uniting them? Verse number 13. I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are spirits of devils working miracles, and go forth to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Verse 16, the place that they gathered them is in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon.